Alright, YouTube. Hello, welcome to the Piper Report. I want to go over some of the changes of Donald Trump's policies that I have issues with. That being said, he is still doing far better than I think most people gave him credit for. But there are a few things of significance that I have issues with, so let's go over them here. First and foremost, I'm kind of upset how he backtracked on his executive order. His initial executive order was a hiring freeze on all government jobs, excluding the military. Now, what this stagnated, essentially, the growth of government. And I think that executive order was actually key to reduce the size of government. And I do believe it was Steve Bannon who was primarily responsible for implementing that. I think Steve Bannon, that was his suggestion, and I think Donald Trump followed through. But the longer we see Donald Trump in office, the more he listens to seasoned politicians and establishment Republicans over the nationalistic agenda. And that is another thing that I kind of have an issue with. And another thing I have a problem with now is his change on NATO. Now, in his campaign, he has said numerous times that NATO is obsolete. And frankly, NATO is obsolete. It is a globalist organization strictly set up to oppose the Warsaw Pact, that is, the spread of communism, which we are no longer facing communism. Marine Le Pen, French candidate for president, is really going off on NATO, and she was actually disappointed in Donald Trump switching his policies, and now he likes NATO. So that one there too, I disagree with him on, and I hope that we do eventually get out of NATO because, frankly, we have many troops all over the world, and NATO is a waste of money. We can get out of NATO and we're still going to have allies. The US is still going to be involved in a lot of trade. Us leaving NATO is not going to make us the black sheep of the family where people ignore us. It's also not going to make us susceptible to attack. No matter what, our defense will still be there because we still spent a lot of money on our military, especially defense spending. Moving on now, I have another issue with regards to his changed behavior on the Federal Reserve Chairman, Janet Yellen. Now, this issue is more of a practicality to me. Practicality being that I really don't care who the chairman of the Federal Reserve is, because I don't think we should have a Federal Reserve. And I could go on and on about that, and that is my pizza timer, so I will have to go put my pizza in the oven quick, but we'll get back to that soon. But the main issue I have with Janet Yellen is Donald Trump was basically calling her out in the campaign. He was essentially demeaning her and saying, we don't want her running, we don't want the Federal Reserve, and now he backtracked that. And not only did he say that he likes Janet Yellen as a person, he agrees with a lot of the Federal Reserve's policies and implementation of those policies. So to that regard, I do have an issue with that because that is a type of practicality that we do not need at all. Alright, my pizza is in the oven, so we are good. So moving on. Now, I do have an issue with this whole Syria thing. I'm not really upset that he attacked Syria's air bases. I am upset, though, that he did it so quickly. I think a proper investigation is essential to have before you use any type of military involvement. You have to be absolutely sure you know what you're doing is justified. And based on the lots of documentations from Assad's interviews with people and also the White Helmet people on the ground in Syria touching victims of gas attacks with no gloves on, there's just a lot of contradicting evidence that leans both ways. So I think he should have really adhered to the concept of a thorough investigation before you use military force on another nation. That being said, he said he is not putting any ground troops in Syria, so as of now that is indeed the case, and that I am okay with. Now, I'm also okay with military action on North Korea. Now, I know a lot of people aren't, but let's face it, North Korea is a problem, and they have been a problem for decades. And the only way to solve the problem is to get rid of the problem. And that is a little fat lunatic who says he's going to kill everyone in the West. And who recently, this is true, you can look it up on North Korea news, put a man on the sun. So you know they have a lot of technology now if they can do that. Imagine what they're going to have in technology in a few months from now. Their nuclear warheads will probably be able to hit Jupiter. You never know. But on a more serious note here, taxes. Specifically, tax reform. Now, the worst kind of tax of all is inflation. Inflation is a hidden tax that people don't know they're paying. That's the worst one of all. The next one is the progressive income tax. And yes, that was the original name given to it, the progressive income tax. Because before 1913, we didn't have any of progressive income taxes. We received most of our money through tariffs. That has changed a lot now, as we can see. So what I'm hoping with the tax reform isn't specifically tax cuts. I think we need to simplify the tax code. Instead of a tax code that's like 3,000 pages long or 5,000 pages long, whatever it is, have one that is very simple. When you do that, you cancel out a lot of the loopholes. You get rid of the regulations. You really kind of drain the swamp in that type of regard. And I think that is key. But I also don't think we can just keep giving tax cuts out and simplify a tax code unless we actually minimize our government spending. And that our government spending is insane. We spend way too much and we need to do massive cuts. The problem with massive cuts is that where do you do it at? The Republicans don't want it on the military, and the leftists don't want it on entitlements. But one of the two has to get cut a lot. Due to FDR instituting the welfare state, that takes a lot of the money away from the U.S. government now. The government has to take care of its people, and there's nothing wrong with the government taking care of its people, but not at the expense of someone else's labor. I'm sure many of you have heard me rant about this before, so I will not go into it at all. But it has to be said. In order to have the most prosperous economic prosperity in the U.S., we have to get rid of the welfare state. We have to get rid of the welfare state. But now I'm getting off topic. I am digressing, and I don't want to digress. So to bring everything back around now, tax reform, I mentioned what I think needs to happen with it, but what I'm kind of upset with it is that he is pushing it back again. Instead of bringing tax reform up next, he is going for the new healthcare bill, the healthcare 2.0, to try to garner public opinion for that and garner public support for that bill, which I think if he does anything realistically similar to the last bill, there will not be any congressional support for it and there will not be any Republican support for it. The fact was the last healthcare bill was Obamacare Light. There was absolutely no free market modalities incorporated into it at all. It was all about the moderate to the progressive view of healthcare. What needs to happen now, if Donald Trump and Republicans want to actually achieve through Congress, pass a healthcare bill that is pretty essential to the free market, then they will have to start way on the right, because when you go through Congress, especially the Senate, you will negotiate with other senators because they can filibuster legislation. So that way right healthcare bill will start leaning more into the middle. Then I think that's where they will find a common ground for healthcare. But this is all speculation right now. We do not know exactly when Trump is going to move his new healthcare bill, but he did say he wants to do that first before tax reform. I think this is a bad idea. I think we should now start working on tax reform and simplifying the tax code and cutting spending. And then after that, go on healthcare. Now, the reasoning to do healthcare first is because when you figure out how much you're going to spend on healthcare, you can then modify your tax code to kind of fit in that type of scenario. And I understand that. However, what I think needs to happen is that instead of keep on putting patches and patches on Obamacare, they should let it completely fail. Let it completely fail and start over from a free market principle. Because if you try to fix it at all, when it does fail, the Republicans and you, Donald Trump, will actually be blamed for it. And Obama and the Democrats will be scot-free because they weren't the ones that did any kind of modifications to it. So I do hope that he leaves healthcare alone for now, let it fail, let the Democrats take the blame because it is their fault, and let's work on the tax code. Let's work on simplifying the tax code, cutting taxes, and reducing spending. So those are mainly the issues I have right now with Donald Trump and some of the policy changes he has been doing. Now, I'm not saying these are flip-flops. The fact is, when you're the president, you have a much more broad range of things to see than you deal with your campaign. So, oh wait, I forgot one. He should, which I still think he should do, he said in the campaign that he would label China as a currency manipulator. He has not done this. In fact, he has said they are not currency manipulators. Now, this isn't true. What China does, what it means to be a currency manipulator, is that when China gives their exports out, the government subsidizes a lot of those exports, so that reduces prices. When it reduces prices, that means the supply you can get more out to other countries. Countries buy more China goods because it's cheaper for them. At the same time, businesses in China's get to actually keep their business there, and they get to keep their job growth up and stuff like that. So I think that's the main reason why Donald Trump did it, or he could be working with China now, maybe to combat North Korea. But either way, China is a currency manipulator, and they should be treated as such. But like I was going to say, Donald Trump has actually been doing a hell of a job as president, especially since he has exactly no political experience whatsoever. I mean, he's doing pretty well. There are a few issues that I have trouble with, which I just mentioned most of them. I hope he doesn't keep changing his positions a lot. I don't think there are flip-flops, though. I really don't. Maybe some of them, but for the most part, no. But when you're the president, you see a lot more things. And I think that's essential to Donald Trump's modified behavior. That being said, like I said already, he has been doing a pretty great job as president in his first 3 months. I think he will continue to get better. And this video isn't really a hit piece on Donald Trump. Just some things that my political viewpoints that he is kind of contradicting. And I just want to make that known to everybody. So now you know, and I'm done.